I'm Amanda Hale, and today we're going to talk about Compliance Depot and why it's important to all of us and why COK uses it. Compliance Depot is a third-party company that COK has chosen to use for all of its vendors. Every vendor that comes on your property needs to be set up with Compliance Depot. Whether you're going to use them one time or 100 times, they have to be set up and in compliance with Compliance Depot. I know this seems like it could be a pain in everybody's behind, but it can be very easy, and it's very, very important for all of us. It's important for COK as a company because it keeps us in compliance with the Federal Patriot Act. The Federal Patriot Act makes sure that we aren't using vendors that are known terrorists or a danger to the company. It is also very important to you and your employees because we need vendors that are insured and are stable in case something happens to one of us while they're on our property. As well as our residents, it's important for their safety. We don't need a contractor out that doesn't have insurance and could possibly harm them. So all around, it's very, very important that we have all vendors on the Compliance Depot. What are we going to do today? Today, we are going to look at how to log into the Compliance Depot system, how to check out those vendors and see why they're incomplete, see if a vendor is complete, and also account locked, take a look at all the possible problems that your vendor could run into, or at least a few scenarios, so that you can help your vendor get back on your property. Because remember, no vendor can touch foot on your property unless they are set up in the Compliance Depot system. We're also going to look at insurance certificates, how to read an insurance certificate, where to find your vendor's insurance certificate online, getting your vendor set up in the EPO system as well as in the Compliance Depot system. We'll touch on that as well. And also reporting. There are many reports on the Compliance Depot system that you may be able to use for different things around your office. So let's check it out. The first thing we're going to do is take a look at how to set up your vendor. The first thing you need to do is make sure all of your vendors, again, I know this is redundant, every vendor that you use that steps foot on your property should be set up with Compliance Depot. When you have a new vendor that you're getting set up, the first thing you can do is go to the COK intranet, go under the Accounting tab, and under Accounting Documents, or Vendor Documents, you're going to have a folder that says Compliance Depot. Under that folder, it says Compliance Depot Vendor Packet. This will always have the most up-to-date packet information for your vendors. In this packet, you can print it out, hand it to your vendor. The idea is for the vendor to get themselves set up with Compliance Depot, but this will give them a nice jump start. The first cover letter explains why COK uses Compliance Depot, what information that Compliance Depot will look at and gather, including certificates of insurance, licenses and permits, tax ID numbers, W-9, and all the background checks. It gives them information on how to contact Compliance Depot to get set up and to get enrolled. It also includes for them so that they can see right away a copy of the vendor service agreement that they will be required to sign. And then the next, a copy of a sample insurance certificate, a W-9 form, and that is it, all the pages of the W-9. This packet is your starting point for all of your vendors. Now, after a vendor is set up, or if you need to check a vendor that is already set up to make sure they are compliant with the Compliance Depot process, you can go back to the COK intranet homepage. And at the bottom, under the link section, of the intranet, you'll find a link to Compliance Depot. Each property has been assigned a username and password to access their vendor information in Compliance Depot. If for whatever reason you do not have your username and password, please contact Shay Davis or your area administrative assistant, and they will be happy to get that information to you. You can log in once you have that username and password. And the first screen is going to pop up to you is the site navigation screen. On this screen, we're going to start by showing you how to look up a vendor. I have a vendor that's going to come on my property, and I want to see if they are able to, if they have met all the criteria that Compliance Depot and CLK requires. So under the site navigation, you'll click vendors, and the vendor, I'm going in the very top, whatever vendor you're looking for, you're going to type their name in here. I'm going to look for Turfmaster. And this is an important box over here. When you come onto the screen, it's automatically going to be clicked on Starts With. You want to change this to Contains. And the reason for that is many vendors go by they have to go by their legal name when it comes to Compliance Depot. So necessarily what you may know them as may not be what's on their W-9. So if you don't click Contains instead of Starts With, it won't find your vendor for you. So we're going to go ahead and click Search. And at the bottom, you can see that Turfmaster has popped up and is available. Now, the recommendation column is the most important to you at the moment when somebody's coming on your property. If this does not say approved, if it doesn't say approved or exempt, you cannot allow this vendor on your property. Turfmaster is approved. You can get a lot of information right here. You can get their business address, remittance address, phone, fax, and a copy of all of their documents. Now that we've looked at Turfmaster and Turfmaster has been approved, we're going to go ahead and I want to look at a vendor and show you a vendor that has not been approved. So we're going to look for Winters Roofing. I'm going to go ahead and just type in Winters, make sure my box is clicked on Contains, hit OK. And Winters Roofing, here's my vendor that I wanted to look up. Winters Roofing is showing incomplete. Now, there's a lot of reasons why they could be incomplete. And before you start requesting insurance certificates or trying to guess what could be holding them up, or you have the vendor in front of you and he doesn't understand why he's incomplete, he's telling you that he sent them everything that they could possibly want, you're going to click on their name in red and then click on the recommendation incomplete. It will bring you to a screen, and on this screen is every result for every criteria that we require. As you can see here, this vendor has failed on general liability insurance policy. What this is telling you is that this vendor has not supplied Compliance Depot, or Compliance Depot has not received their general liability proof of insurance. Also, the vendor has been failed, you can see a fail, for auto liability combined single limit of $500,000 or more, as well as a workman's comp policy. Everything marked in gray on this page is going to tell you what they are missing, why you're getting that incomplete status. At the same time, you can see all the things that they have already passed. Down here, like we talked about earlier, why we use Compliance Depot, this is where you find their criminal backgrounds that they've passed, in different Better Business Bureau, all criteria that CLK requires, and you can see right here that they've passed it all. So if the vendor's sitting in front of you and you can pull up the screen and tell them you need to get your general liability insurance up to date with Compliance Depot. And I know a lot of you have heard from your vendors. I've heard it from vendors. Well, I've sent it to them 5 times. So what you can do is you're going to go back and try to look in the screen. They've said they've sent it. You're going to go back to the front screen where it said Winters Roofing. I just hit back twice. And under Documents, you'll see the little notepad. This screen right here under Documents will allow you to see anything that has been turned into Compliance Depot for processing. When you come on the screen, automatically this box is going to be checked right here that says only show most recent insurance and W-9 documents. Because the insurance renews every year, Compliance Depot for some of our long-term vendors will have multiple documents in here. By keeping this box clicked, I can see exactly what they're basing their incomplete status on. They've received the vendor agreement, They've received the W-9. You can view it here. And it says one insurance certificate. So I'm going to go ahead and look at the insurance certificate, select the insurance, and I can see that this is an insurance certificate for their auto policy. Their auto policy currently holds $500,000 each person, $500,000 each occurrence. And as we saw in the first screen, they're incomplete for their auto policy because it doesn't meet our current guidelines. But I do not see any general liability or workman's comp insurance on this either. So I'm going to hit back, and I can unclick only show most recent. And here, when I hit the drop down box, I would see anything that's been turned in and not processed. So I can tell the vendor for Winters Roofing, I do not see where they've even received your general liability insurance certificate. We need to get that resubmitted to them because they're not showing it on file even to be processed at this point, and you'll remain incomplete. The next question you'll get from a lot of your vendors after you tell them you've checked their documents, you don't see anything pending for Compliance Depot to process, and they're going to say, well, I've sent it, and you're going to tell them I need you to send it again. And you can have them email it to documents@compliancedepot.net, and this information will be available at the end of the slide, and it's also available on the intranet on the vendor cover letter where all documents should be emailed. Email is the best way of communication with Compliance Depot. Faxes sometimes get lost or are misplaced or not answered, and we have found that email is the absolute best way to get your information to Compliance Depot. If your vendor has not submitted an insurance certificate, you're talking to Winters Roofing, and they need to know what we require for their general liability insurance. You can get a copy or an example of what we require them to have as far as their insurance coverages go back on the main page. So you're going to go ahead and go back. Go back to your main page, and under documents, you see where we were just at, where we viewed the documents that they have. Next to that is also a sample insurance certificate. You can click on this while the vendor's in your office, or for your own reminder of what we require and what the insurance certificates have to look like. On the incomplete screen, if you see that somebody was incomplete for additional insured verbiage and you want to know why, you can compare all insurance certificates to this example certificate that's on the intranet. If an insurance certificate does not meet our criteria of coverages, all coverages are outlined on the right hand side of the certificate. This is your general liability and the coverages we require. The next would be auto liability, coverages we require, and workman's compensation and the coverages we require. The description of operations, locations, and vehicles, this wording is very specific and must be followed exactly, or else they will not pass in Compliance Depot. This is our additional insured verbiage. I recommend that if you have somebody fail and the only gray that you saw is for additional insured verbiage, you look at this very closely, because they will fail it for something misspelled, a word left out. This verbiage is very important. Also, they'll need to have CLK or compliance. CLK requires that Compliance Depot is listed as the certificate holder, and this address and fax number must be listed identical, or again, it will get kicked back for incomplete. So this vendor has no general liability insurance or workman's comp. You can print a copy of this and give it to them, or have them give it to their insurance agent so that they can get an updated version of their insurance certificate sent over to Compliance Depot. If you have any issues with the insurance certificate portion of the criteria, and you've looked at the insurance certificate, you've checked the incomplete status, you know what they're missing, The incomplete status may be for a coverage amount, like the auto liability that we saw on Winters Roofing. Their auto liability amount was not meeting our criteria. That does not necessarily mean that that person will never be our vendor. In a situation like that, you need to contact your administrative assistant, Shay Davis or Brittany Fletcher. And again, we'll have all of their information at the end of the video. And you can ask them at that point, but you need to tell them that you have looked, you see, the only reason that they're incomplete is because the auto insurance does not meet our liability. Here is a copy of their auto liability coverage. Can we override this? And that's a decision that will come from Shay and Brittany and from our Memphis office. But first, you need to make sure that that's the only thing they're missing. In Winters Roofing case, they need their general liability insurance and also their workman's comp. So until you have those two things, you wouldn't even mess with trying to get the override on the auto yet. You want to make sure this vendor is as complete as possible. The next thing we're going to look at is when you run into a vendor that says account locked. We've all run into these vendors before, and what account locked vendors mean. Let's go ahead and pull up a vendor that we know is account locked. And I'm going to, again, put the vendor's name in vendor name, make sure I have contains, and OK. And Ferguson HVAC, account locked. I click on the red, I go to the recommendation, and you can see it will not show you pass, fail. It won't show you pass or fail for any of their insurance documents. The only thing that does pop up pass is their criminal backgrounds. What account lock means is that this vendor has not paid their annual fee. Compliance Depot requires that all of our vendors pay an annual fee to be to have their documents processed. It covers their background checks, the man hours to double check their insurance certificates and things of that nature. CLK does require that our vendors pay this fee out of their own funds. It's not something that we generally pay for them, and they are responsible for it to be able to do business with us. When you see a vendor that's account locked, a lot of times that means that that annual fee has not been paid. They came up for renewal and it has not been paid yet. And you can see that this vendor was approved. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, you can see the recommendation history. And you can see that this vendor was approved on 7/5/11 and account locked on 10/17/11. This tells me that this person or this vendor came up for renewal and has not paid their renewal fees. If I need this vendor to come on my property, or let's say I have a capital AC project, I'm going to call this vendor and tell them that they need to call and pay their Compliance Depot annual fees so that we can go ahead and make sure that all their insurance is up to date and they're good to go to come on our property. Account lock status means that this vendor cannot come on my property. Another thing that you will run into is with some of our large vendors, our large national account vendors, you will see them marked as exempt. Let's go ahead and take a look at HD Supply. HD Supply pops up. They have many different locations and addresses, remittance addresses, but you can see that each one is marked as exempt. Exempt vendors are considered and approved through the Memphis office. We do not exempt our vendors it's not a common practice that we would exempt a vendor. These large national accounts, you will see oftentimes that they are exempt. There's specific criteria for them to be able to be that way. We know that HD Supply has insurance, and we've gotten the documents that we need from each of these individual businesses. If you click on docs, you'll see that their insurance certificates are listed, W-9s, and their lead certification. And the last recommendation that you may run into under recommendations is not enrolled. we're going to go ahead and pull up Bullock. Again, vendor name, contains, do my search, and I pull up nothing. Bullocks. And I know I found them earlier. I think I'm spelling it wrong. So let's go ahead. And this happens too. And you will get frustrated. So I know it's Bullock's Heating. So I'm gonna go ahead and put in heating. And again, mark the contains. And here they are. And that's a good example. Sometimes that's why it's important to hit the contains, and you may have to try 2 or 3 different words to find your vendors at times. You can see that Bullock's is listed here. Why it wasn't pulling it, I'm not quite sure, but it will pull up the heating and air. You need to just, it's really important to hit that contains, as you can see from that example. So I'm going to click on Bullock's Heating and Air, and you can see Bullock's Heating and Air is not enrolled. If I decided this vendor, you can scroll down and it says client vendor list. This vendor is currently on client vendor list. Remove here. Remove this vendor from the CLK, or from the client vendor list for CLK. This means that this vendor has been signed up for CLK but has not yet enrolled or done any of the steps in order to become a vendor as of yet. So this may be a new vendor that's just getting into the system. They need to call, pay their initial setup fee to then start the enrollment process and get their documents in place. It's important to remember that any new vendor, as Bullock's Heating and Air may be, any new vendor, while they're getting enrolled, it takes 24 to 48 hours for Compliance Depot to process any information that they send them. So you have to be a little patient. It takes 24 hours for payments to be uploaded on a general basis, for payments to be received and reflected on the website. When they're paid over the phone, that is the absolute quickest way to tell someone to pay either their renewal fee so they can get out of that account lock status, or to pay their enrollment fee so that they can get started getting processed. If they mail in a check, this is going to delay your approval status, which ultimately delays the amount of time before they'll be able to come onto your property and do any work for you. So we definitely encourage you to encourage them to call and make the payment over the phone or pay it on the website directly. And one last thing as it comes to vendors and their approval status, we're going to go ahead and go back to an approved vendor like B.O. Graham Plumbing. I just hit back. And this was listed when we did our heating search. And I'm going to click on them. I can see that they're approved and they've had an override. You will see these overrides on some of our vendors. B.O. Graham Plumbing have an override. You're going to scroll down, pass. They passed everything. An override on their EPA lead certification. This override is something that you cannot do. If you have a situation, apparently like this vendor did, where maybe they're working on a property where the lead certification is not required, but Compliance Depot is not recognizing that, that is when you contact your administrative assistant for help, or Shay Davis for help, or Brittany Fletcher for help. We're all here to help. We all want to help, but we also want you to be able to look at the screen and know what you need help with for. A lot of times, 9 times out of 10, when a vendor gets stuck or when you get stuck, it is something that you can quickly look at this criteria sheet and tell them exactly what you're missing. Their general liability insurance certificate is expired. You can get a new one, have them email it in, and that takes care of itself. You tell the vendor they are responsible to get this in. Again, 9 times out of 10, that's what you're going to run into. Occasionally, you'll run into problems with coverage amounts. In liability carriers not meeting the ratings, EPA lead certifications, the additional insured verbiage that we looked at on that example insurance certificate. Again, that's vital that it reads exact. If you're having an issue, as we sometimes do, where an insurance agent will not change 1 word, 3 words, that's when you contact those key people who are able to help you and look at it and come up with a solution to try to get that vendor, to see if we can get that vendor to be one of our valued partners. So once that's pretty much a quick overview of where to look, where to find your pass and fails, where to find out if you're ready to use a vendor, where you can find a copy of their insurance documents and their W-9 documents, a copy of a sample insurance certificate. Again, this is vital. You'll use this a lot, especially when you see incompletes for wording problems on the additional insured, and coverage amounts. You can pick your sample insurance certificate, print out a copy of it, compare it to the insurance document that they have on file for the vendor that you're looking at. This is one of your #1 tools. When you have a client that has been approved and they've made it completely, or a vendor, I'm sorry, not a client. When you've had a vendor that's been approved and made it all the way through the Compliance Depot system with a flying color approval status, your next step is to get them set up in the EPO system so that you can do billing. At this time, Compliance Depot and our EPO billing system do not communicate with each other. So it is vital that once you have a vendor set up and approved in Compliance Depot, you pull off copies of their insurance certificate. And again, I'm going to go ahead and click Show Most Recent Only so it shows me the most up-to-date. Pull their most recent insurance certificate, and you can right-click and save target as when it's a PDF document, and save it somewhere on your desktop. And then you're also going to pull off their W-9 and save it on your desktop by right-clicking, Save Picture As, and I'm going to put mine on my desktop. I'm going to rename it W-9. Once you have both of these saved, you will email copies of the insurance certificate and the W-9 form to Brittany Fletcher so that she can get them processed in the EPO system. In that email, I would also include, when you hit back here, I would also include their vendor ID number. You can get the vendor ID number by clicking on the vendor. Underneath the vendor name and above the recommendation is their vendor ID number. So you're going to email Brittany a copy of the insurance certificate, the W-9, and tell her that their Compliance Depot vendor ID number is 370703 for Bogram Plumbing. They've been approved. All documents are online. Can you please add them to the EPO system? And from there, she will get them set up. To help keep track of your vendors and their approval statuses, your property gets daily emails letting you know which ones of your vendors are approved and incomplete for the day. These emails are also received by Brittany and Shay, and they update the EPO availability and the EPO status according to the Compliance Depot status emails that they get every day. If you run into a problem where you're trying to put in a bill and it's telling you that something's expired, you've logged on to Compliance Depot and you've searched for your vendor and you found that they were approved, but they're still not approved in EPO. Again, that's a quick email to Brittany and Shay just to let them know that this vendor and their vendor ID number give them the vendor and the vendor ID number, that they are approved in Compliance Depot. Can you please open them in EPO? And they will be happy to do that for you. And the last thing we're going to show you is, last thing I just want to show you briefly, if you go back to the Compliance Depot home screen, there's also many reports available to you, and you can click on reports. There's evaluation reports, recommendation reports, location reports, enrollment reports. You can pull any of these reports for your property. Play around in here. You can find out a list of everyone who's failed, evaluation report. This evaluation report, when it comes up, lists all of your vendors and their current status, and you can download it into a different form. This will help you when you're tracking or trying to track down certain vendors or any kind of audits that you might do. There's lots of tools in this reporting menu. Play around with it if there's anything you can't find. Again, you can always contact Shay Davis or your area administrative assistant, and they'll be happy to help you. But as far as your vendor searches and any kind of auditing that you want to do, a lot of these different evaluation reports and recommendation reports can help you with that process. I hope that this helped you navigate a little bit better around the Compliance Depot website. And if you have any questions, on the next screen you'll see all the contact information for the Compliance Depot support that you have within the company for your administrative assistant, Shay Davis and Brittany Fletcher. Thank you and have a great day, COK.